Okay, so this is going to be a video about Lightning Network. There's lots of videos out there about Lightning Network, but I don't think any of them are that good, at least not the ones I've seen. There are a lot that that speak about Lightning Network on a very abstract level, but don't go into the technical details. So I'm going to try and cover both here. And I'm not going to go into extreme depth, but you should hopefully come away from this video with a good idea of how it works, enough that you feel you can trust the technology. I'm going to start by reviewing some Bitcoin basics. We'll go through these pretty quickly. Of course, you have the blockchain. It's a series of blocks that are cryptographically tied together, each one to the previous. If we zoom in on a particular block, for all intents and purposes, it's a series of transactions. So let's take a look at an individual transaction. You have the amount of Bitcoin you want to send. You have the public key address of where you want to send that Bitcoin. You have the public key address where you want to draw that Bitcoin from. And then you have a cryptographic signature. And importantly, that cryptographic signature needs to be created using the private key that corresponds to the public key you're drawing the funds from. Hopefully it's intuitively obvious why that is important. You can't withdraw funds from an account if you don't hold the private key. Okay, so we're going to do this real briefly from the opposite direction. Let's say you want to put a transaction out there into the Bitcoin chain. You create the transaction, you set the amount that you want to send, the public key address of the destination, your own public key address, and then you sign it with the corresponding private key to create a valid signature. You then send that transaction out into Bitcoin land, peer-to-peer network of nodes. It eventually gets included in a block alongside a bunch of other transactions, and then that block is ultimately added to the chain. Now, this system has scaling issues. There are tons of people out there trying to include their transactions in the blockchain. We have this global permissionless network anyone can participate in, but we have very limited resources. A block is 1 megabyte. Each transaction is about 350 bytes, and that's actually fairly optimistic. Each block takes approximately 10 minutes to produce, but the upshot is we can do fairly simple math, and you find that we can do about 10 transactions per second on the blockchain for the entire world, for the entire blockchain. You cannot add more than 10 transactions per second to the blockchain. That's severely limiting. And again, this is an optimistic estimate. It's really maybe closer to 7 transactions per second. Not only do you have the problem of the fee market that gets created, driving up fees, making it impractical to send small amounts of Bitcoin, even besides that, it's just impractical for point-of-sale transactions because you have an average 5-minute wait before your transaction even gets onto the blockchain, and then you have 6 blocks to confirm that transaction, etc. So it's not great for use as a general peer-to-peer cash system. So Lightning is trying to solve these scalability issues. But we'll start with the abstraction, and I'll go through this pretty quickly. Basically, the abstraction, you have 2 people participating in what's called a channel, which is essentially a shared account where both parties pay into this shared account, and then each one of them is entitled to half that balance. But then you can pay one another simply by adjusting the amount of the balance that belongs to each person and just keeping a record of that off-chain. Then when you're ready to close the channel, you simply grab back the amount of Bitcoins you're entitled to out of that channel, and then you close the account and go on your merry way. So this solves scaling issues in a serious way. So there's only 2 transactions that you put on the chain. You put one transaction on the chain to open the channel, and you put one transaction on to close the channel. Everything in between that opening and closing of the channel is instantaneous and takes place completely off-chain. So we can pay each other as many times as we want. None of it has to go on-chain. That eliminates potentially 99+% of all transactions that might go on-chain because you can do them all off-chain. So that's the idea there. That gives you better scaling properties. Importantly, security is maintained. It is not a custodial system. You will hear people saying that it's a custodial system. That's because they don't understand how this works. You do retain control of your private keys, and you have the power to close that channel at any time and get your coins back, and there's nothing anyone can do to censor that transaction any more than they could censor any other normal Bitcoin transaction. So that's the abstraction. I find that most descriptions of Lightning end somewhere around there, but that doesn't really tell you anything about how it works, and it doesn't explain the security model. And so there's a lot of misconceptions floating around that I'd like to address, because it took me some time to wrap my head around this, and it's actually a pretty brilliant concept. Okay, so how is this possible? Well, fortunately, it's actually relatively straightforward. But again, I've had trouble finding really good, concise descriptions of how this works. So let's give it a shot. So first of all, everything I'm about to explain happens invisibly. None of these details are things that you need to be actively thinking about, but I, for one, like to understand the technology I'm using. I don't trust stuff in a black box. I like to open it up and see what's in there. Okay, so I'm going to break this into a few different steps. You have opening a channel, using a channel, closing a channel, and securing a channel. So we're going to start with opening a channel. So opening a channel is actually just a normal Bitcoin transaction. The way you open a Lightning channel is you deposit into a multi-signature account. Multi-signature accounts are a core feature of Bitcoin. This is not specific to Lightning. Lightning just takes advantage of it. So how do you do that? Each party creates a public-private key pair, and they construct a special type of address that is the combination of their public keys. Importantly, this also means that in order to sign transactions for this account, you need to have a combination of signatures from both private keys. You cannot unilaterally create a transaction on a multi-signature account. It has to be signed by all the keys connected with that account. Okay, so depositing into a Lightning channel is fairly straightforward given this background. You specify your public address, which is the combination of your public keys, one from each party participating. You specify how much Bitcoin you want to deposit from each of your external accounts. Then you sign that transaction, each of you using your respective private keys to create a combined signature. Okay, then, just like normal, you send that transaction off into Bitcoin world. It gets included in a block. It gets sent off to the blockchain, included, and now you have successfully opened a Lightning channel. Okay, but there's a problem here. The channel is controlled by a combination of two keys, so you both have to agree on every transaction. So how can you get your funds back out of that channel unless you trust that the other party is going to sign a transaction to let you get those funds out? Okay, so what you actually do, and I skipped over this earlier because I wanted to explain multi-signature accounts first. What you actually do is before you deposit funds into the account, you construct a transaction to pull your funds out of the account. But you don't post it to the blockchain. So let's go back in time here to before we deposit funds in the account. You create what's called a commitment, and you construct a transaction just as before, but this time it's a transaction that allows you to pull your funds out. Now you might be thinking, how can you pull your funds out if you haven't put them in yet? The answer is you don't. You just save this transaction as a commitment. Each party keeps a copy of this thing, and then you create your deposit as described earlier. Then that deposit goes out into the blockchain, again, as described earlier. It gets, here we go, it's included in the blockchain. Now, because both parties already have a copy of that commitment, either party can come at any time, post that commitment to the blockchain, and pull their funds back out of the channel. So hopefully I explained that fairly well. That is the core of how Lightning works. The commitment is already created ahead of time, And so you can close the channel just by posting the commitment that was already agreed upon and signed by both parties. Okay, so that's how you open a channel. How do you use the channel? Using a channel turns out to be very straightforward. It's just a matter of updating the commitment, or rather creating a new commitment. So how does this work? You have a commitment that already exists that reflects a current balance owned by each party. Well, you basically agree that balance changed, so you create a new commitment that reflects the amount that you will each be able to withdraw after that balance has changed. Then you each get a copy of that commitment. So that's how you use a channel. Hopefully that was clear. If it wasn't, listen to it again and see if it makes sense. Closing a channel. I kind of already went over this, but we're going to go over it again briefly. You just post the commitment you already have. You post the latest valid commitment. So what happens when you post that commitment is the account gets emptied and you go on your merry way. Okay, that's closing a channel. So there is a problem. You can attack this system by posting the wrong commitment. Let me clarify what I mean by that. Let's say I pay you. I'm the guy on the left, all right? I pay you, the guy on the right. And that means we create this new commitment that reflects the balances we will be able to withdraw. That invalidates the old commitments. And now we have updated commitments. Problem is, there's nothing that anyone can do to prevent me from claiming that invalid commitment is the latest commitment and posting that to the blockchain, thereby withdrawing more funds than I am entitled to. So if I post this earlier commitment that's already been invalidated by a later commitment, in theory, that means I get to withdraw more Bitcoin than I'm entitled to. So does this break Lightning? No, it does not. There is a solution to this. And it's a super special magic Bitcoin script that I didn't mention earlier because it would have been confusing and made no sense until we got to this point. But basically, there's an additional step that's involved when opening a channel that enables you to deal with this attack. So preventing the attack. The thing is, you can't really prevent the attack because you cannot stop someone from posting an earlier commitment that's been invalidated. However, you can respond to the attack due to the nature of this super special magic Bitcoin script that I mentioned a moment ago. So when you open a channel, there's this additional step where you include this script, and this again is all done automatically. You don't have to think about this stuff. There's a script that's included in your transaction where you open the channel. What does this script enable you to do? It specifies a lockup period after the channel is closed. Now, during the lockup period, either party has a chance to submit a later commitment, thereby proving that a commitment that was already posted is not the latest commitment. Keep in mind, every single commitment is signed by both parties. So there is no way that as one party involved in this channel, you don't know with certainty which commitment is the latest because you signed it. So the only reason for posting an earlier commitment is if you're trying to do something evil. So how do we deal with that evilness? We have this lockup period in which the other party in the channel can say, hey, that guy's being evil, and they can post a later commitment, thereby proving that you're lying about which commitment was latest. Hopefully that makes sense. If you prove that you have a later commitment by posting it, then that enables you to seize all the funds from the channel, not only your own, but also the attacker's funds. Now I'm going to show that visually, and maybe this will make it clearer if it's not clear already. So we're in this situation where Trollman on the left has posted an earlier commitment, an invalid commitment. How does the guy on the right deal with this? Well, he still has the final commitment, the correct commitment, and what he can do is during the lockup period, he can post that. And what that ultimately does is drain all of the funds, not only the funds that he was already entitled to, but also the funds out of the attacker's portion. So this disincentivizes the attacker's behavior. Okay, that's Lightning, pretty much. I haven't tried to do a video like this before, so hopefully this is helpful to somebody. If it's unclear, maybe leave a comment and I can try and clarify things, or at least learn from what I've done wrong in this video. So yeah, that's about it. I hope that you learned something, and peace out.